Hey, what's going on, guys? Alex Miner back at y'all with another episode of AFMMA Analysis, or AFMMA Analysis, sorry. But yeah, it's been a little while. Ain't been too much going on. But this weekend we have UFC Moncton with Volkan Oezdemir and Anthony Smith at the top of the card. This is a very good fight of 205ers, very big heavy hitters. Volkan Oezdemir, he burst onto the scene about 2 years ago, just knocking everybody out, including Jimmy Manoa and some other guys in the top 10 of the 205 division. Anthony Smith was a guy that came out of nowhere within a little more recently. He was fighting at 185 and he was doing well, but then he had a loss. He moved up to 205, and ever since then he's been on a tear. He's been knocking out pretty much every opponent in the first round, just like Volkan Oezdemir was when he first came around. He just came off of a brutal knockout over Shogun Hua not long before he knocked out Rashad Evans. So that's two former light heavyweight champions right there that he's just demolished. Volkan Oezdemir, he's coming off a loss to Daniel Cormier, the champ, and arguably one of the best of all time. But yeah, we saw in that fight that he has holes, and his main one is the ground. But the thing with Volkan Oezdemir too is he's not the most technical on the feet either. He does have a lot of power, and that's how he gets his knockouts. He usually comes out in a ferocious flurry and basically catches the guy in the chin and puts him down. But there's not much technique to his striking whenever I see it. On the other hand, Anthony Smith he definitely has a method to his madness. He knocks people out with pinpoint strikes. He sets up his shots, and he's just much more of a technical fighter. His Muay Thai is very good, very brutal, and he's just very powerful. He's also the taller fighter. I believe he's the younger fighter as well. And he's just more hungry at this moment, and he has more to gain from this fight because Volkan Oezdemir, like I said, has already fought. Well, he has fought DC, but I guess DC isn't currently coming back to defend the 205 belt, but we've seen that he already has limits, whereas Anthony Smith has not been stopped. He hasn't lost in the 205 division yet, and if he gets by Volkan Oezdemir, which I do think he will, then he should get the fight between he should fight the winner of the Alexander Gustafsson and John Jones fight, and rightfully so. So yeah, like I said, in that fight, I'm expecting Anthony Smith just to take it because he's the more skillful fighter. Volkan Oezdemir is going to come out really quick, and Anthony Smith has to be elusive in that first round, first maybe 3 minutes or so that he's just coming out throwing for the fences, just to make sure that the skill deficit is taken advantage of properly. Because though he does have a skill advantage, other fighters like Jimmy Manoa that Volkan Oezdemir fought did as well, but they were just caught with their pants down because they just weren't expecting the onslaught, and if you get touched by him, it doesn't really matter what skill level you have at that point. So yeah. In the co-main event, we have Michael Johnson versus Artem Lobov. As we all know, Artem Lobov is the main sparring partner of Conor McGregor, the one that kind of sparked the whole back and forth between Conor McGregor and Khabib whenever Khabib and his boys ran up on Artem, and Khabib smacked him on the neck and all that, confronting him about saying that he was a coward or something like that, him pulling out a bunch of fights, and all in response to him calling Conor McGregor a chicken, whatever. He was initially supposed to fight the Zubaira Tukhugov guy, the one who ran up in Conor's face after the fight, and They both kind of traded blows. I think Tukugov got the worst of that exchange because he definitely got his chin checked in that exchange. But yeah, as we all know, Tukugov got pulled from that fight, and Dana White has said that he won't fight in the UFC. That's when Khabib made the whole statement about how if he kicks his brother out, then he's gonna break the contract as well. We'll see how that all turns out, but Michael Johnson was the one that they got to step in. This will definitely be the toughest guy that Artem Lobov has ever fought. Last guy that Artem Lobov fought was Andre Fili, and he was probably the toughest before at that time, and Andre Fili definitely beat Artem Lobov handedly. Artem Lobov in some ways he moves like Conor. He doesn't really block. He just uses complete head movement in his defense. However, he's not quite as slick or as quick as Conor, and not quite as surgical with his punches like Conor is either. Although whenever he does land, he throws a lot of power. So he's kind of an elusive brawler type of fighter, whereas Michael Johnson, as we all know, was at the top of the 155 division for a long time. He has some of the quickest and most powerful hands in that division. However, he moved down to 145 because I believe he was on a 3-fight losing streak, and he just needed to find new life in a new division. And since then, I think he's had 1 or 2 wins. This will be his second or third fight, whichever. And I'm thinking that he has quite a big advantage. Like I said, he has very hard hands. He's the only guy to beat Tony Ferguson. Not too long ago, he knocked out Dustin Poirier. He was one of the first guys to ever hurt Khabib Nurmagomedov. He almost took out Justin Gaethje in their first fight. He has some very lethal hands, and Artem Lobov's chin is definitely going to get tested in this fight. And yeah, Michael Johnson is known to go balls to the wall in his fights as well, as is Artem Lobov. However, I think Michael Johnson's experience and skill level is going to prove to be too much. However, Michael Johnson did take this fight on about 2-3 weeks notice, so that will play a factor, especially seeing as he's cutting down to a weight class that he didn't always. It's a new weight class for him. He has to cut more weight for, so the weight cut could prove to be a damper on his performance. We saw at the weigh-ins that he was actually 2 pounds over. However, in light of him losing 20% of his purse, Artem Lobov promised that he would give him that 20% back because he just appreciates Michael Johnson stepping up and taking the fight. It was also said that Artem Lobov was the one that chose Michael Johnson to be the replacement. So that just proves that Artem Lobov is always looking for the biggest challenge. However, he does want to fight Tukugov to get revenge for all the stuff that went down before. And he said that if Tukugov is to leave the UFC officially, then he's going to after this fight as well, because he wants to fight Tukugov. And if they both leave, they'll most likely fight in Russia. So, see how that turns out. However, this fight, currently, I think Artem Lobov is definitely going to lose. However, I could be wrong. He does have some hard hands. And Michael Johnson, that sometimes is liable to blow his load in a fight trying to go for the finish. That's exactly what happened in the fight with Justin Gaethje. He was pursuing the finish so much against a durable guy that he eventually got tired, and he was the one that eventually got knocked out. And Artem Lobov is pretty durable as well. I don't believe he has not sustained a knockout in the UFC yet. So putting him out could be a challenge. However, considering the guys that Michael Johnson has been able to put on the canvas and to put out, I think that his hands will do the trick. However, you never know. It's MMA and anything can happen. In other news, there's been a lot of other things going on in the UFC recently, such as the biggest news is apparently there's being a trade between the UFC and OneFC for Ben Askren and Demetrious Johnson. Ben Askren is a former champion of Bellator and of OneFC, who was basically retired, but saying that the only reason that he would come back is for big fights like GSP, but he of course would have had to be in the UFC to get those fights. But now it looks like it's going to happen. Demetrious Johnson, he had just had his first loss at 125 against Henry Cejudo in a decision. However, he is the most successful UFC champion there's ever been. He's also, in many eyes, the greatest of all time. He's definitely one of the most well-rounded fighters I've ever seen in the UFC, or anybody has ever seen. Puts everything together so well, and just one of the highest IQs in the sport, one of the best performers in the sport. Although he was not getting the respect he was due, seeing as he was a smaller fighter. The 125 division just wasn't seen as exciting because he not seeing knockouts left and right, although he did have some, and he had several finishes. One most notably was his arm bar that he got in midair after suplexing Cejudo, whatever the other guy's name was. But yeah, just wasn't appreciated in the UFC. There was rumors going around that White was trying to close that division several times. He definitely didn't like that he didn't immediately want to take the TJ Dillashaw fight. He said that he would, but he wanted more money than what they were offering him, and then he lost to Cejudo, so now Cejudo's taking that opportunity. And now that they're trading him, it seems to most people that they might finally be closing down the 125 division, because he was basically the face of that division, and none of the other guys in that division are really big names. Demetrious Johnson was pretty much the only one that people really recognized in that division, and now that he's leaving and Henry Cejudo might be going up to fight TJ Dillashaw, it definitely seems like they may be closing out that division for good. So DJ will be much more appreciated in OneFC. They have a flyweight championship over there, and I feel like over there in Asia, I think it's in Thailand or something like that, they're just much more purist in the way that they observe the sport. America, it's a lot more about the knockouts and just all the other crap that goes into fighting these days, like the trash talk and things like that. It's a lot more about show these days and just the glamour of it all. But yeah, and Ben Askren, he's, ever since this announcement's been made, he's been making a lot of noise. He's been calling out everybody, calling out GSP, Khabib Nurmagomedov, to see who's the best grappler, seeing as Ben Askren is known as one of the best grapplers in MMA, has some of the most relentless wrestling. I believe he could have been, or maybe was, an Olympian at one time, but just known to have a very high wrestling pedigree. He said that he wants to whoop up on Colby Covington, as many do. He's talked crap to the Diaz brothers, like everybody has, trying to get those guys in there for money fights. Jorge Masvidal, even him and Mike Perry have gone back and forth. However, he kind of wrote Mike Perry off, saying that he sucked and he probably wouldn't get that fight. Mike Perry Even though he is a popular fighter, he has not made it to the top ranks of the welterweight division quite yet. But yeah, he's making a lot of noise. I'm not sure whether or not UFC fans are going to appreciate his style, because he is kind of mainly just a wrestler. From what I've seen, he's doesn't put his hands together that well. He just goes in, shoots for the takedown immediately, and just what I've heard from other guys like Michael Bisping, just does the bare minimum and just wins fights through decisions. He is undefeated, and Chael Sonnen was kind of the same way, and people really liked him. However, Chael Sonnen would beat the crap out of his opponents from top when he could, whereas it doesn't sound like Ben Askren is quite as brutal from top positions. So we'll see how that translates into the UFC. A fight between him and Khabib Nurmagomedov would definitely be interesting. We can only assume that he's probably not going to fight for the belt, seeing as T. Wood is the champion and that's his training partner. However, anything can happen in the UFC. You never know. Friends fight friends all the time. But he's just looking for big spectacles at this point. So we'll see how that all plays out. Yeah, have a good time watching the fights, guys. I will be giving play-by-play results on the fights, as I always do through my Twitter handle. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like, leave a comment. Have a good one.